We define creativity as being very artsy. You have to be a painter to be creative. And I see it almost as a little genie that comes and visits sometimes. Like, it is one project out of 200 that I've had.
Creativity is a concept that has always intrigued me. Growing up, I used to think that you could either be a creative or an analytical person, nothing in between. And even though I had plenty of ideas for projects I wanted to pursue, I never considered myself a creative person. These were some of the things I was thinking about as I sat down to talk to my friend Adri. She's a product lead at Google, and outside of her 9 to 5, she shares tips and insights of how to break into big tech to an audience of more than 1 million Spanish-speaking followers across TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. Hi, Adri.
Hello.
How do you see creativity?
It's very specific to me and how I perceive the world and how I perceive life. But I do perceive creativity as this like mystical process. I see it almost as a little genie that comes and visits sometimes. It's a very magical experience for me, but I know this would be something that would vary from person to person.
And do you think you were always a creative person?
Probably, with question mark. And the reason why I phrase it this way is because I think that if you would have asked my mom when I was a kid, she would have defined me as a creative person. But then growing up, in every project that I undertook, I always used to compare myself to other people that were doing similar things to what I was doing. And because I saw these people as more creative, then I was like, oh, okay, then they're the ones that are being creative. Therefore, I am not, right? Because they're better than me. For a big part of my life, I would not define myself as someone creative, but I always knew that I thrived in the process of making things a reality or like developing ideas or developing projects. And it was only until fairly recently that I saw that I was applying creativity to all of this process of creating things, which I know sounds very obvious, but it was not for me in the past.
I really like how you put it that for you creativity is like
magical genie.
So it's seen in the very positive light, like you get these tracks from creativity and then you work on your projects and you bring them to life. But I think for a lot of people, and I've heard this myself growing up, it's a binary thing. It's like either you're creative or you're not.
All right. Or you're analytical or creative, but you cannot be both. We define creativity as being very artsy, right? Like, or you have to be a painter to be creative, or you have to be heavily involved in arts to be creative. And it's not always the case. You can apply creativity into different areas of your life. And one of them that's very top of mind for me at the moment is business. Entrepreneurship is a very creative process, and you're applying creativity to some parts of the entrepreneurship journey. You don't need to be a painter, basically, or you don't need to be artsy, or you don't need to be a hippie. You're putting new information into the world, right? And that's creativity at the end of the day.
There's this guy, he's called Uberman. He has a Uberman Lab podcast, which is great. Like, he's a neuroscientist. He talks a lot about these kind of things, how you can access it and how you can optimize it. And he divides creativity into divergent thinking and convergent thinking. Divergent thinking is like the brainstorming phase of the process, when you come up with ideas. Then convergent thinking is when you take one idea and you're like, okay, I'm gonna execute it. But like, which one should I do? How to prioritize? But then he also goes into like the creative process and the journey. You know, you have this project, but I'm sure this was not the only project that you have ever done. How's your process, basically?
Yeah. My creative journey had a lot of ups and downs, but I think one constant throughout my life is that I've always had a parallel project to the main one that I was in. So for example, growing up with school, I used to, of course, like go to school during the day, but then in the afternoons or like in the weekends, one of my hobbies was writing. Every year I would produce one novel that I would work on for the year, and then in summer I would finish it and I would send it to a contest, for example. Not for the sake of winning the contest, but just for the sake of having a goal for that project, right? And then in university, I had university on one side, and then I was working in ISAC, which is a student organization that was very entrepreneurial. In a very reduced way, it worked as a startup, basically. You had your team and stuff. There were still projects that I was bringing to life and that I was starting from scratch. So my creativity was applied there. I finished university and then I went on a gap year. And there's also a lot of part of going a bit beyond the fear of what a traditional life is, being open to experiencing a creative life that I also felt during the gap year. And during that gap year, I was also having other side projects that allowed me to keep this entrepreneurial mindset or like creative mindset rolling. After that, I started working, and I also had another project on the side, and we're like coming up with the launch of different products and failed completely. We also wanted to launch a journal and it failed as well. And then social media started taking off around last year. Like, it is one project out of 200 that I've had, right? Yeah. And it's so easy to look at this project that has worked for me and be like, oh yeah, she just started making videos. The skills that I'm now using for social media, those were skills that I've been developing for the last 13 plus years.
And this is what people don't see.
Exactly.
Because they see you succeeding now and they're like, oh, it's easy for her. And she just puts a couple of videos, one took off, and that's magic and that's it. But they don't see all the effort that came during the years. If we agree that creativity becomes a choice, why do you choose to be creative?
I don't know any other form of life that's not a creative lifestyle. Or like I try to make it as creative as possible. What is it for you?
I think it just gives me fulfillment to have ownership over the things I can create. My favorite thing is to take one of my ideas, plan it out, bring it to life, and see the results of it. I'm not focused on the results, but I have complete ownership over the direction where it goes.
Interesting, because I find fulfillment in the early stages, whereas like you find fulfillment in the final project or in the final produce, right? Creativity is also defined by bringing something that doesn't exist to life, right?
Okay, creativity is a lot of things, but in its core, it's novelty.
It's novelty, yeah. What's originality? Is anything really original at this point? The only thing that has not been produced or that has not been said is something that you as Mariana or like as an individual are putting out there. Because I'm sure that, for example, for social media, I decided to start talking about big tech and career development, but I'm not the first one to be doing this. And there's people that are doing it many other ways better than me. Like they excel at what they're doing. There's no Adri doing this, right? And there's no Mariana posting on LinkedIn. And my own voice is part of my creativity and it's part of what I'm putting out there. And then like, of course, like it has the shape of big tech and career content.
You touch a very important point, which is originality, and how I think it stops a lot of people from even thinking about creating.
It's daunting.
It's like, why am I going to create something if there's already so many resources out there? Because there's not you.
It's not you.
So wherever you do, you're giving your voice.
Yeah. And also I think originality is a bit overrated.
Yeah.
Even things that are very novel don't always succeed. If you have the drive to do it and you have value that you're bringing to others, then originality is overrated. So just do it.
I'm curious about your creative journey in social media. Going back to the beginning, how does it all come to life? How do you get over the initial fear of even posting?
When I started social media, it was a very specific project that I was undertaking because I wanted to overcome the fear of being judged. And I wanted to be comfortable putting myself out there in a very public setting. I always admired people that had these that came naturally to them. You know, I have friends that are so comfortable being on camera and they just like started recording themselves and showing their faces and talking to the camera. And I was like, I sort of admire and envy that a little bit. And I wish that came naturally to me, but it was not the case. So when I was planning this out, I was like, okay, what is the easiest and fastest way to do this? I was like, okay, I will start posting videos on the internet. And then, so the moment came where like, okay, I will start posting videos, but what can I share that can add value? I realized that many friends came to me for career advice. So I was like, okay, I can package this and this is the what I'm going to talk about big tech and career advice. My why at the time when I started was very much self-development, almost as an experiment. And then it sort of went well and it took off. And then as it advanced, my why quickly changed to, I've seen a lot of guys in the US talking about how cool big tech is and their experiences and, you know, like these crypto bros. But I never saw women sharing their experience on these big companies. I never saw someone from Spain sharing this experience. It was never someone from my background.
Taking one step back, you were mentioning how you started these social media projects for self-development, which I find very interesting, and also relate to the fact that you're focusing on the journey and not the outcome.
Yeah.
Because that's also something else that blocks a lot of people. Because if you don't see quick results, you just give up.
There's a lot of people that block themselves from putting their creativity out there or like their project out there because they get very comfortable in the planning stages or like in the ideation stages. And it's something that I also used to struggle a lot with. Like I'm very happy to not be executing because I thrive in the ideation part. For me, taking the step or making the leap to developing the idea was very daunting, and I think a lot of people might be that same place where like you're always putting excuses for yourself. If I want to create content, then I need an expensive camera. Bullshit. You know, I'm filming on my 4-year-old phone. Yeah. In this day and age, everybody has a phone with a camera. We all have access to internet, TikTok and Instagram or like any social media apps or free apps. So there's zero like entry barriers. Any excuse that you're giving yourself is literally just a limiting belief and it's just an excuse. Don't give a fuck about what people think. Because people will judge you anyway.
And we're all gonna die.
And we're all gonna die. And we're also busy with our own lives. Yeah. Nobody gives a crap about what you're doing. And you're the one person that's like constantly overanalyzing what's happening in your life.
I like this actionable step. There is to think in each step I take, what's the worst case scenario? And then how would I feel if that would happen?
Oh, I think that's something that I would do in therapy, but I've never done it for my own projects.
If your goal in this case is to post a video, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe someone's gonna come to you and be like, hey, I didn't like your video. But are those your friends? Are those people you care about? The people you actually want to help? Those are the ones that should be our main focus. And we all have this negative bias that makes us focus on the negative. Maybe it's one person that doesn't like your content. And so what? It's not going to be the one tapping your back. But so you need to tap your own back and then you choose the people who support you.
It's almost like I detach myself from the result. Like it doesn't matter because my worth is not attached to the video I'm producing or the content I'm producing.
It's the spotlight effect that we think that everyone is focusing on us. But no, they're just focused on their own life.
Exactly.
They might not even see whatever you're posting out there.
Exactly.
Plus, if you do have that fear of judgment, it's much harder to be a positive person because our default is to be negative. You can try to look at the positive sides, but if you still have that negative side, you think, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? And how would I feel about that? And then still do it.
It doesn't matter if you're scared or you're not scared. You feel the fear and you still do it.
It gets easier as you go.
Yeah.
All right, Adri, we said a lot of things, but how would we wrap this up?
I think I can help. I was just listening to you two talking. You're trying to demystify creativity, right?
Yes.
The first myth is you either are born creative or you're not. And that's the first myth, right?
Correct, yeah.
Which is you're already creative, but you're choosing to be creative. Second myth, you're a creative person. So every day you're good to go. Every day you have ideas. Every day you can pull up a project from zero. But that's not true. So how do you keep going is knowing why you chose to be creative. So you chose to be creative because you keep developing yourself through the creative work. You choose to be creative because it fulfills you. So even if you're scared of posting something, you have fear of rejection, but then you say, but that's not why I chose to be creative.
Exactly,
I chose to be creative because it makes me feel alive. And so I'm going to stick to it no matter what.
Yeah. You understand?
Amazing.
We're getting lost. Sidetracked again.
Go back.
You lost.